Hey, welcome to another episode of Your Faith and Health Community. I'm your host, Pastor Jackie Jackson. And as always, on behalf of myself and our producer, Anita Alexander, we want to thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day to spend with us. And we hope that we give you some information prayerfully that will help improve your quality of life. Now, you're probably looking and saying, I have never seen red curtains in the studio. Well, I'm not in the studio today. Today, I'm at home in the comfort of my own home. And so it looks a little bit different, but everything is going to be the same, including, and you know it was coming, me asking you, have you gotten, if you don't have it, you didn't have it from the last time we talked, have you gotten health insurance? Remember, health insurance, health bills, doctor bills are one of the number one leading causes of bankruptcy. So if you don't have health care, you need to get it. Again, depending on what state you're in, especially if you're in the state of Ohio, you can get it through Medicaid, depending on your income. If your income is, what is it? Oh man, I got a little bit lost here. 17,000 or less a year, 17,005 or less a year, that makes you eligible for Medicaid. Medicaid covers your dental, vision. If you're like me, you wear glasses, is important. And especially if you're like me with 3 prescriptions in your glasses, that's expensive. So it covers your vision, it covers hospital, emergency room, all of those things that you need. Now, if you don't meet that income requirement, then you can go to the marketplace. Because open enrollment closed, I think, in December. But if you've recently moved, gotten married, congratulations. Gotten divorced, congratulations. Maybe, I don't know, depends on how you feel. If you've recently had a baby, you recently started a new job, or you're recently getting released from a correctional institution, that is called a change of life event. And you can go ahead on and still go to the marketplace and get health care insurance. It's important. I'm not going to stay on that real long. And if you notice, I've been pretty good. I haven't been hounding you and pounding you on it. I should, because there are so many people who still don't have health care. But I'm going to be nice today. I'm going to back up. We have a really great guest. Someone I know, have come to know over the years and really respect and love. This young lady's name is Leslie Washington, and she is a survivor of gun violence. She is also a survivor fellow with Everytown for Gun Safety. I know you know what that is. I've talked about it a number of times. We are the #1 leading gun violence advocacy organization in the country. We are over 6 million, headed for 7 million strong. And Leslie is joining us today to share with us her story, what brought her to Everytown, to talk about the advocacy work that she does, and her desire to not see other families, other mothers, other fathers have to go through what she had to go through because of gun violence. Leslie, thank you for being on the show.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. My name is Leslie A. Washington, and I'm currently living in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Thanks again for having me speak to you about my personal experience with domestic and firearm violence. 9 years of a mean, vindictive, and controlling person dictating my life. 9 years of abuse and manipulation. For 9 years, I was in a relationship with my ex-husband. But our story went on long after we separated. Even when I left him to get to a safe place, only after cracking the orbit in my left eye, leaving permanent damage, I didn't feel free. I arrived in Southeast Missouri, where I stayed in a shelter for women for a brief period of 6 months. Right after me leaving him, he posted a firearm with a fully loaded clip on the bed beside him. He put it on his social media page, sending a clear and plain message to everyone and me that he was planning to make good on his promise to kill me. He would often say that he would kill me. Now more than ever, I believed him. He even resorted to threatening my mom at her home, claiming that he would find me and finish what he started. He would threaten me by sending me messages through fake Facebook accounts. I told his parole officer about his threatening messages and his abuse. No one did anything substantial. Even though he was a convicted felon and had a history of abuse, The fact that he carried a firearm haunted me. This was only one of my experiences with gun violence. In 2015, I watched alongside my family as the police could not solve the murder of my cousin Keith, who was shot and killed. And in 1984, I cried when another cousin, Reginald, died by suicide. Our family still doesn't have closure from their deaths. Gun violence needs to stop. It can be stopped. That is why I joined the Missouri chapter of Moms Demand Action to fight gun violence of all types. Gun violence tears apart families everywhere. Gun violence is not just in Baltimore or New York or St. Louis, it is in small rural parts of the country as well. In Missouri, we have the eighth highest rate of gun deaths in the country. Yet, Missouri has some of the most lax gun laws in the country. Gun violence is preventable, but lawmakers continue to abdicate their responsibilities to make the necessary changes to keep guns out of the hands of domestic abusers and other people with the dangerous histories, even as other states enact laws to stop domestic abusers from getting guns. Gun violence and domestic violence go hand in hand. My story is like thousands of others in our country. Too many domestic abusers have access to guns. For 9 years, I lived with the abuse from my ex husband. For 36 years, I lived without my cousin Keith. For 5 years, I've mourned my Reginald. No one else should have to live in fear of an abusive partner with a gun at their disposal. No families should have to mourn the loss of loved ones from gun violence. Lawmakers need to act now. I am currently a senior survivor fellow with the Everytown Survivor Network. I have been a survivor's fellow since February 2020. No one wants to be a part of this family, but we all support each other in our journeys of going through gun violence and the loss that it takes and affects every day. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Leslie, for sharing your story with us. Really appreciate it. I know every time that we share our stories, it can be kind of re-traumatizing. I mean, because you're living it over and over, but also understanding the importance of people hearing the stories. Because most of the time, people hear about gun violence on a news report. That news
Right,
report is usually short, and it's usually sandwiched between maybe a Subway sandwich commercial, talk about what happened, and it goes straight from that, whatever that act of gun violence is, into maybe talking about the supermarket that's opening down the street or talking about
right,
a fish fry that's coming up. So it's important for survivors of gun violence to share their stories. And listening to your story, which I've heard before, but every time I hear anyone, when I tell my story, it always seems new. And whenever I hear someone else share their story, it
mhm,
always seems like something new. And there's a lot to unpack in there because we're talking about the loss of family members, but we're also talking about domestic violence.
yes,
And domestic violence usually comes in like one lump sum, so to speak. But there's
mhm,
domestic violence by gun,
mhm,
and that people aren't even or may not be aware how many women as well as men, but not by any proportion, the number of women and then children whose
mhm,
lives are taken by gun violence or who's shot by gun in a
right,
domestic violence situation. So
mhm,
I also want to mention, with you being on here, we're both a part of Everytown, you being a fellow, mentioning that when Everytown speaks of a survivor, most of the time people hear survivor and they think the person who was just shot, who the person that was shot and they lived. But there are survivor families. And that means that if you are a family member who have had a loved one taken by gun violence, you survived them. It's just like if you think about it at funerals, they say when the obituary is read and it said that whoever Mrs. Johnson is survived by her husband or by her
mhm,
children or her grandchildren. So it's
right,
it's it's going along that same line. So I want to ask you, like I said, it's a lot to unpack. One, you told your story. What would you say to another woman or another person who is in a domestic violence situation, and especially where a gun is present? And also, guns in domestic violence doesn't always mean the weapon was fired. Sometimes it's used for intimidation. It's put out there, and you put out a gun, it's going to scare you. So what would you say maybe to someone who's dealing with this and afraid to or not sure what to do?
Well, first of all, Pastor Jackie, they if they are wanting to leave that situation, they have to understand that they just can't leave, because and especially in this pandemic, you know, gun violence and domestic violence have definitely exacerbated because of being in situations where the person has lost their job or whatever the case may be. But I would say that if they want to get out and if they're really wanting to get out, they have to plan accordingly. They have to make a plan. They have to put their personal belongings, like if they have a trusted friend, say like I'm going through that situation and you and I live in the same town, I can bring, a packed bag with my personal identification, my clothes, my medication, all of that to you, trust it until I can make a getaway safely, quickly, because you definitely have to get, quickly, get away if you
But
can.
not to for somebody to be confused, because I heard you say you can't just leave. In some cases, you do have to just leave.
Yeah,
So
you do.
I don't want anybody to be confused with thinking, oh, someone said I have to stay in this situation. You have to
No,
judge and gauge the situation.
exactly.
And there may be a point where you got to forget about your belongings, your IDs, your shoes,
Exactly.
everything,
Because
and
you
you got
might
to go.
have to get a fleeting moment that he's out the door, and you may have to take that moment and get out of there, grab the kids, whatever, and get out of there while you have the opportunity. So just gauge, like you say, just gauge the situation. And then I also want to add to Pastor Jackie that Missouri is a free carry state. So that means I can go into Walmart, purchase a firearm without a background check. And as long as I have the money, which, firearms cost, depending on what you get, they cost a lot of money. So you can go into your local Walmart and you can get a firearm without a background check, without anything.
And
And I just,
I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but I kind of want to stay on course with one on the domestic part because yeah. So we're going to talk about that the open carry did the same thing here in Ohio where you don't even need a permit anymore, but just kind of on
mm,
the domestic violence because you experienced that, and
right.
to God be the glory. You're one of those ladies or men, you're not a man, but I'm saying of individuals who have had to deal with that gun violence, I mean with that domestic violence and with guns being introduced. And you shared your story, but can you just maybe, if you feel comfortable, just
Mm-hmm.
sharing a little bit more or sharing a little bit your process of how you transitioned out of that and maybe a few steps that you took if you feel comfortable with that.
Sure. When the incident happened, when he fractured this part of my eye underneath the orbit in my left eye, I didn't go to the hospital until after his nieces and nephews. They took pictures of my face. They sent it to the police. Then the police came to his mother's house and did a wellness check to see, what was going on. So his mom was there, Brian was gone, and the police came, to talk to me to see what was going on and if I was okay. And they asked if I wanted to go to the hospital. Well, first of all, it was just one officer that came initially, but then they decided to dispatch another officer to his mom's house because Brian at that time was gone, and we didn't know where he was. We didn't know when he was going to come back. So of course I was antsy and nervous and panicky and jittery and all that type of stuff. So the police officer came. I told him what had happened, that we had got into an argument and this is what occurred. And so he asked if I wanted to go to the hospital. And I said it, yes, in front of his mom. Yes, I would like to go to the hospital because I need to see what's going on with my face, why my lip is bleeding, will not stop bleeding. I was all swollen and bruised and everything. So they dispatched, like I said, they added another police officer to come, to his mom's house or whatever. And so when we were leaving to go around to the police station, here he comes walking down the hill and he's like, what's going on? Like a deer in headlights, like he didn't do nothing wrong. So they put him in one car and I was already in one car. So then they took us, both to the police station or whatever, because he had obviously taken the truck with all my blood and everything, away. So I went to the police station. They put me immediately in an ambulance, took me to DePaul Hospital, which is here in St. Louis, Missouri, and they put me in a room. They immediately took the phone out of the room and everything like that, for safety reasons and stuff like that. So then the nurse came in. I had a male nurse. Then the doctor came in, and the blood vessel in my right eye had busted as well from the pressure of him hitting me on the left side. So that in turn busted the blood vessel in the right eye. So they took me for testing, CAT scans, MRIs, and all that fun stuff. So that's when they found out that from that pressure of him hitting me like he did with a closed fist, and he, all that swollen and everything like that. So then I stayed in the hospital after my tests and everything like that. I got out later on that night or whatever. So then his nephew came to pick me up. Mind you, this is his family, this is his nephew. And then he took me to his sister's house and I stayed with her. And then I called the Safe House for Women in Cape Girardeau. I was looking to actually leave St. Louis. And so that's what I did. I called the Safe House in Cape Girardeau. I told them what had happened, and they said that they had a bed for me. I said, well, I need to go to the doctor Monday to see, if I need any type of eye surgery or anything like that. So thank goodness I didn't need any type of surgery. Thank God for that. So I was able to get on the Greyhound bus and leave St. Louis and head to Cape Girardeau. So when I got there, I had to go to the police station, and then I had to then they took me to the safe house. So then I stayed there for a period of 6 months. I went to court to get my ex parte. He came both times because they had to continue it because he said we had a disagreement, which was a whole entire lie, So then we had to go back. And so the first time we went to court, I was walking from the safe house because it wasn't that far. So I was walking and I got to the courthouse and I saw the truck that, he had at that time. So he's like back up against something. So when he saw me coming, he called my name and I instantly like just freaked out. I was like shocked. So I saw these two ladies going into this room, this office, and I told them, I said, I'm here for my ex parte. That's my ex-husband. He's not supposed to talk to me, but he's talking to me anyway. And I was like literally freaking out. So they took me into their office, locked the door. And then when it was time for me to go to court, the sheriff had to walk me over to the courthouse. So then we got in front of the judge. He was like, we had a disagreement, blah, blah, blah. So it was continued. So then he came down a second time. Now, this time, he comes with his mom and his sister. I don't know what he brought them for, but anyway, they came down. I'm going in the courtroom, and his mom is coming out, and she's like, "Well, you could speak to me." No, I don't have anything to say to you. You let this happen. I have nothing to say to you. So then she calls my mom and lied and said I called her a bad name, which I didn't. All I said was I was shocked that you were even here with your son when this happened to my face. I was just shocked. So then at the second court date, I had him served with divorce papers. And so he says in front of, I was already in the courtroom, so I didn't hear it. So there was nothing that they could really do. So he's like, oh, I'm going to kill this bee today because I had him served with divorce papers. Why would I go back to you and you tried to kill me? You fractured my face. You left permanent damage. I have inline bifocals now in both eyes, not just one, but both eyes. So why would I even continue to deal with you when you have physically, mentally, verbally, financially abused me and threatened me with the firearm? Why would I even want to be around you?
So let me ask you, because you've got, so you had a few court dates with him.
Correct.
And like you said, you were able to serve the divorce papers during the second court date. Let's
Right.
fast forward some, because I know a lot of times with domestic violence cases, sometimes even some really horrible cases, sometimes the abused, the person that's abused will come in and ask the court to drop charges, or
Right.
sometimes just not show up for court at all.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the courts, unfortunately, are not always, don't always seem to give the abused sometimes the care and the protection that they need. So let's
Right.
jump ahead to when we get to the finality, the final part of this. Was he convicted? Did he receive time, or how did that turn out?
Well, when I got to Cape and I called his PO and let her know what had happened and that he was in jail. He spent 1 week in jail, 1 week, got out on a $525 bond. Now, he had multiple POs after that happened. And for my case, and he has a
When
history
you
of
say
domestic
POs, I'm sorry, when you say POs,
parole officer.
okay,
He was on parole and probation at the time he assaulted me.
and they didn't
So
violate him.
they did, no, she didn't violate it at
Okay.
all.
So what? So but when we get to the end, like trying to find out, was he eventually? Did he eventually serve time? Was it dismissed? Was he put on probation? What was the final outcome?
You know what, Pastor Jackie? I really don't know because once I left him alone and I did what I was supposed to do on my end just to make sure that I was protected, like with ex parte and stuff like that. I did what I was supposed to do. So I felt as long as I was covered, I was okay. Because like I said, even he did send threatening messages. He did the digital stalking and things of that nature on, with the fake Facebook pages and stuff like that. So I felt in my heart what I should have done, what I needed to do. Because, like you said, a lot of women do not stick to an ex parte. They do not stick to filing charges. They don't stick to all of that. And I felt that I needed to do that for myself, to protect myself and protect my sanity, because dealing with him for 9 years, we were married a little bit over a year, but that 9 years of going back and forth to culinary school, going to school with bruises on my face, having people in my business asking me questions, and it was just embarrassing. And I felt that I had been embarrassed enough, and I just had enough. I had left him, but then he found me. But once I left him this time, like his sister would always make a comment, oh, you're going to come back. I will never go back to your brother. And I meant that from the bottom of my heart. I was never going back. to what I dealt with, like no self-esteem,
Right.
no self-worth, no none of that. I didn't want that. And to this day, my sanity and my peace is my priority,
And that
you know.
definitely is something that it should be. But I just want to be sure, just so that people are clear as well. So the
Hmm.
prosecutor's office, no one ever made contact with you to say this is the outcome of the
Mm-mm.
trial. So
No,
how long ago was that?
it was in October of 2013.
Okay, so about what, 9 years ago?
9 years ago, yes.
Yeah,
Almost 10
I was
years.
hoping my math was right. You know.
Yeah, almost 10 years, Pastor Jackie. Yes, almost 10 years.
Okay. So, but apparently, whatever the outcome was, you have been able to be safe up to this point,
Hmm.
and God say the same, continuing forward, and that part is really really awesome. I want to make sure before we get to the end to talk a little bit about your activism that you do around gun violence, and can you just share some of that?
Sure. I do advocate on a lot of different levels. I do on the local level as well as the state and national level. I've lent my voice for the Violence Against Women Act a couple of times where it was being reintroduced. So I lent my voice to that. I do a lot of advocating like around the different national campaigns that we have for Everytown and Moms Demand, like Wear Orange, Survivor Week. I've done a few personal care drives for the Safe House for Women where I've spearheaded them like firsthand, like going out to the community and getting the people to donate the different bins and things like that where they can donate these different things for the Safe House for Women that are so needed every day. Like they have an influx of women and children that come through there regularly, and especially with COVID, like you said, there's situations where a woman needs shelter and they don't have anything but the clothes on their back. So, that's why I do what I can to advocate for the Safe House for Women because they helped me for the 6 month period that I stayed there. So anything I can do, personal care, drive hygiene items, saran wrap, toilet tissue, whatever, people donate or wanting to donate. Like I know one year, maybe last year or whatever, I did another personal care drive. I had a few bins in the community. And then we set up like a Target gift registry where people could go online from the comfort of their home, donate through Target. They look it up. They can look up Safe House for Women, Moms Demand Action, and they can donate from from the comfort of their home and stuff like that.
Okay, and I think didn't you post something to one of the Everytown pages a few times
Hmm.
about collecting items? I was sure,
Yeah.
I thought I saw that. Um, what other things around do you go to the state houses to
Yes,
speak to
I
legislators?
go to Jefferson City and advocate their pre-pandemic last Missouri Advocacy Day. I was there, shared my personal story. I was one of the keynote speakers, and we were in the rotunda of the Capitol building in Jefferson City, Missouri, where I was able to share my story and my personal experience with gun violence and domestic violence, and then just talking to legislators. And then now that we're in this period of the pandemic of COVID-19 and Omicron and all of that, we've done a lot of our things have been virtual, like for our advocacy days and weeks and things like that. So just talking to senators and virtually and sharing my story. Now sometimes I can share my story and I don't cry, but other times I can share it and I can break down because I'm reliving that trauma all over again. So it's just emotional for me when I share my story and to share it with legislators and they have a reaction like they understand and they know how imperative and how passionate I am about advocating for women who are afraid to use their voice. Because for 9, I tell people all the time, I said, I didn't have a voice for 9 years. So now that I'm able to use my voice, I plan on using my voice as much as I possibly can.
Okay. And in the few minutes we have left, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And the work that you're doing with the women's shelter, because that's real important. So thank you for doing that and going to the State House, raising your voice, making it aware, making our elected politicians aware and reminding them that they have a responsibility
Definitely.
to pass laws that protect people, not protect gun manufacturers and things of that nature. So thank you for doing that. We only have a couple of minutes. I want to just ask if someone wants to get involved with Everytown, especially if they're a survivor of gun violence, and Everytown defines a survivor of gun violence as anyone who has had a situation involving a gun. It could be that, like myself, you were shot, wounded, you survived, you're a survivor, but it can also be a family member who has had a loved one's life taken by gun violence. It could be someone who has been robbed at gunpoint, someone who, in some cases where they may have been struck or whipped by a gun, beaten up with a, someone hitting on them with a gun. It could be that you saw an act of gun violence. Maybe you were somewhere and you saw someone get shot. You saw someone's life taken. That is also considered a survivor, because every survivor doesn't mean that you physically was affected by the gun violence, but your loved one. It could be that there are some irresponsible parents, and I like to just say irresponsible parents. I'm not trying to make it light, who they don't secure their weapons. They leave them under the bed or in the drawer, and then their child finds it. And unfortunately, either shoots and kills themselves or shoot and kills someone else. That's an unintentional shooting, but that's still a survivor of gun violence. And that family of the one who was lost or shot, it's a survivor, those parents, as well as suicide, those lives who have taken their lives by gun, suicide. So there's a lot to that. So if someone falls into that category, how do they reach out to Everytown, to moms, to get involved, to get engaged?
They can go on the Everytown gunsafety.org, or they can text 644, text ready to 64433, and then that gives you the information to find a chapter of whatever state you're in. If you're in Florida, if you're in Chicago, wherever you're located, you can text that number and you can get in tune with somebody that can gauge you in the right direction.
Okay. And so texting ready to 64433 will help get you engaged with Moms Demand Action in your city or state. Now, if you're a survivor of gun violence, you want to text survivor or text honor to 64433. And the same as when you do the text, it's the same number, but what you preference it with directs to lets individuals know what type of help you're looking for. So if you're a survivor and you again text survivor or honor to 64433, someone will reach out to you from Everytown for Gun Safety, which is the survivor network, will reach out to you, make contact, and tell you how to engage further, to get more information, to connect with those who understand what you're going through, because sometimes people who have not experienced gun violence, whether personally on themselves physically or for their loved ones, they don't always, and I'm not saying that not all, but sometimes people don't get it. I was engaged with an individual, a guy his brother was murdered 50 years ago, but it still affects him. And sometimes people think, wow, it was so long ago, you should get over it. You should be able to get past it. And you don't.
I get that too. I
Right.
get that too. Like, well, you should stop sharing your story. Like, I remember my mom would tell me, "Oh, you should be tired of sharing." No, I'm never tired of sharing my story. If I
Absolutely.
can hear one person in the audience, like I like to do radio, I like to do the news and stuff like that. So if I can hear one person, if one person in that audience, that broad audience of 5,200 or whatever the case may be. If I reach that one person, then I've done my assignment.
And that's really important. So thank you again, Leslie. Want to thank you for sharing your story. Appreciate you allowing us to share in that with you, putting yourself in it back into that trauma, but doing it to make things better for everyone, for families throughout this country. We want to thank
Mhm.
you for sharing your knowledge, sharing what you went through with the court, sharing with us what you're doing in advocacy work and trying to do to help make things better for the women who are dealing with gun violence. It's important that you get help if you're in that position. So listen, everybody, I want to thank you on behalf of myself and again on our producer, Anita Alexander, for joining us. We thank you for Leslie. We're going to get her back on again because believe me, there's so much more to talk about. But we hope that something you heard today touches you, whether it touches you to action or it touches you to realize I need to make a change or make a move. But until then, until the next time we see you, stay faithful, stay healthy.
Amen.